Hello, and welcome to week 2 of me reading excerpts of Argentum song. And again this week there will be an opportunity to win one of the giveaway packs of Animo cards that I talked about in the very first video on this series. So I really look forward to hearing what you guys have to say as you answer the discussion question in the comments. And one of you will randomly receive that gift. All right. This excerpt is going to be a little bit from chapter 5. As soon as Martha got around the street corner in Fenton and out of Ladin's sight, she gave in and allowed herself to skip with joy. It wasn't because the errand she was on was some great adventure in an exciting urban area. Rather, the realization that it wasn't. It wasn't the urban cosmopolitan area Ladin had been banking on. This so-called hub of northern life couldn't possibly result in the wealth Ladin had been dreaming of. The population was only 1/10 of the average city down south, and there were very few goods to trade. Martha couldn't see how the merchant would be able to make this trip profitable. "Martha, wait up! What's the hurry? Why not draw out this chance to get out of that flea's nest they call an inn?" Franklin's voice caused Martha to stumble mid-skip. She looked over her shoulder and saw the bodyguard jogging up behind her. Martha returned to a slow plod as he caught up. Moving quickly helps ward off the chill better than a thin shawl over a cotton frock. "Fair enough. It is festering cold up here," Franklin said. "They must be half-turned to live here voluntarily." Martha felt her face heat up. She looked away, unwilling to give Franklin the satisfaction of a reaction. They had been in Fenton less than 2 days, and that's all it had taken to Franklin to go from treating her like a lady to showing off his mastery of the local profanity. He was acting as if she were nothing more than one of the serving girls at the Silver Cog, the inn where they were staying, the ones who had been giggling around him since they'd arrived. She hurried to change the topic. "Ladin's investing heavily on this trip, hoping for a big payoff by heading north in search of a supposed fountain of silver. It was going to be his next big break. This can't be what he was expecting." Franklin frowned. "The silver veins in the area are about the only thing these yokels have to trade. Why wouldn't it be what he was expecting?" "Sure, there's a decent supply, but haven't you been paying any attention to the prices? It costs only a little less than back home. There's too much local demand for weapons that can hurt the wares. There's no way he'll recoup the expense of the caravan." They walked in silence a couple more blocks before turning together down the town's main road. A large crowd had gathered around a young man in a purple hat and colorful patched cloak. He wore a half-mask with brass rings surrounding crimson-tinted glass discs before his eyes. It made him look inhuman, like one of the golem constructs or watchers of legend. "And now for the grand finale," the man said with a dramatic flourish. "A piece of tech so fascinating that it rivals the powers of the gods themselves. I present to you the crown of my portfolio, the one that earned my title of Tinker 5th Class. Today you will join the ranks of the Alchemist and Council of Seven in witnessing the miraculous. I present to you life." With this, he swept the tail of his cloak and backed away from a slowly dissipating puff of smoke. When the smoke cleared, it revealed a wooden duck, carved with great skill, its wings, legs, neck, beak, and tail made separately and hinged into place. It was a remarkable piece of art, but Martha had seen toys of better workmanship at the homes of her former friends. Franklin clearly wasn't too impressed either. "That's just a festering piece of wood." The performer turned towards Martha and Franklin. "What? Can you not hear the ticking of its heart? It seems you are unconvinced, scoffers of the tinker's craft. I don't suppose you would be willing to place a wager on your claim." Franklin grinned as he tugged the purse of Ladin's coins from Martha's belt. He pulled out a silver penny, which he threw to the performer before Martha could stop him. "I don't know what you have planned," he said, "but it had better be good if you want to keep that coin." The tinker nodded, pulled off his hat, and then lay it with Latin silver inside, beside the duck on the street. Very well. What sort of proof of life would suffice for our skeptic friend? Well, among other things, a duck tends to be less stationary than that, said Franklin. Moving on its own volition, certainly doing more than sitting perfectly still and clicking its tongue. Unless, of course, it's very well trained, the tinker argued. Also, I'm sure you realize that most domestic ducks are clipped to keep them from flying away. The crowd laughed at this, but a few tossed their own silver into the hat to get in on the action. Among them was an off-duty militiaman in a dusty red uniform. I'll join this bet, the militiaman said, but with the additional observation that I've never known a duck what wouldn't eat were an appropriate morsel placed before its mouth. The crowd murmured its agreement. Soon more coins had joined the militiaman's. Even a small, filthy boy, no older than 12, rushed forward with a coin he had no doubt liberated from the pocket of an audience member. And I've never seen a living bird what didn't crap, the boy said, if it was scared enough. The poor performer looked genuinely shocked, and Martha began to hope she might see the return of her coin after all, with interest. Other audience members seemed to share this view, and within moments, the hat was half filled with coins. What? Said the performer. You would attempt to bankrupt a poor tinker? The militiaman held his halberd a little straighter. I'm sure your illustrious guild will cover whatever lack may be within your purse, what with their honor being called upon to justify your claims. The masked tinker grimaced and waved his hands. Stop the betting! Stop that, I say! The crowd, emboldened by his protests, continued dropping coins into the hat until he physically removed it from the road. The tinker shook his head and looked at the crowd again. For proof of life, you require a duck that will move, eat, and produce droppings? The crowd cheered its reply. The lifeless discs over the tinker's eyes turned towards Franklin. I trust you have no additional requirements? Franklin shook his head and smiled into his fist. Right then, said the tinker. Let's get this over with. Martha saw the militiaman nod to two fellow militia. It seemed to her like they were moving to surround the tinker and keep him from running off with the money. The tinker, more like a charlatan, must have noticed them as well, as he stopped edging toward the alley behind him and turned back to his wooden duck. The crowd was growing restless and calling for the proof. Fine, fine, settle down, the performer said. Proof you shall have. He bent down, crushed a piece of bread in his hand, and began laying a line of crumbs before the duck. He kept peering over his shoulder as he did so. However, when he had no more bread, and the militiamen had made it evident he wouldn't be escaping the consequences of his boast, he straightened up and cleared his throat. Duck, I say to you, live. On the last word, the duck's eyelids parted, revealing glass discs patterned after the tinker's own. Its head swiveled to the right and then the left, as if examining the crowd. There was a collective gasp as the animal began to flap its wings and tail. Its movement looked much like that of the marionettes Martha had seen in the South, with the notable lack of strings. Franklin remained unmoved. So far, I've only seen one of the three claims met. Where did I leave off? Here we go. Franklin remained unmoved. So far, I've only seen one of the three claims met. Duck, eat! The duck lowered its neck, parted its beak, and pushed itself forward with its legs, scraping bread and dirt into its bill. Then it snapped shut its beak and raised its neck to swallow. When it lowered its neck for a second scoop, the previous mouthful was gone. The crowds backed away, many clinging to pendants hanging from their necks, as it repeated this wonder over and over again. The street urchin rushed forward while the duck was still halfway to its creator. He seemed determined to expose the fraud before the tinker could disappear with the coins. "Boo!" the boy shouted. The duck's eyes opened wide in astonishment. Its wings and tail shot straight up, and a stream of pellets shot out from under the tail, splattering the militiaman's boot, to the delight of the crowd. Then its bill dropped open with a strangled quack, its ticking stopped, and it fell over on its side. "He's killed my duck," the tinker said. "Get the boy! He'll spend the rest of his miserable life as a drudge for this." Martha and those around her turned her attention to the young wretch who had already fled down an alley. By the time she looked back, the tinker, the coins, and the duck had disappeared. Before long, the rest of those gathered began realizing the tinker and the youth might have been in league with each other. There was some good-natured grumbling about being cheated, but the only two who weren't grinning at how they'd been tricked into paying for their entertainment were Martha and the militiaman with the soiled boot. Okay. Today's discussion question is, why did I spend so much time describing the audience's interaction with the tinker before the show begins in Chapter 5? What might I have been trying to make you believe? And I look forward to hearing what your ideas and thoughts are on that. Thanks so much for spending this time with me. I look forward to next time. Bye.